Hello, and welcome to the 330 Forecast, where we discuss business agility, innovation, and the future of business. I'm your host, Stephen Voiles, and my guest today is Michael Graber. Michael is the founder and managing partner of the Southern Growth Studio. He's an author of 2 books and many more articles on innovation, insight, strategy, and transformation. He's a frequent speaker on these topics, and when he's not working, Michael likes to play music and write literature. How are you doing today, Michael?
I'm doing really well. Honored to be here, Stephen. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, sure. Thanks for coming and sharing some of your experience with us.
Yeah,
Can you tell us a little bit about your background and maybe how you first got started in innovation?
sure. Of course. I took a very sideways path to having a career in the world of commerce, and it's something I swore I would never do. I was, for whatever reason, just liberal arts. I thought I was going to be an author and a poet, and was publishing things and went to graduate school and have an MFA in creative writing and was teaching and was very happy doing that part of it. But then the university politics were abhorrent. I was getting called into getting people fired, hiring committees, and having the different schools of thought were willing to really sabotage somebody's whole reputation and career just to have their way. And I
Wow.
had this revelation. It's like, wow, this is just over a school of poetry, a certain approach to an art form. Why are people being so ugly? And so it, I saw that my career was very limited inside an organization that was so politically taken over like a university, and sought to find a culture that was much less politicized. And the deeper I searched, I found that you can find business cultures that have less politics than any other culture. So I made the leap, did something I swore I would never do, started in publishing. I was an editor and a writer, and then became an information architect and usability engineer when that was still a thing. Then jumped into becoming a copywriter and creative director in advertising, then a director of marketing and brand strategy at a software firm. And I took all those lessons and saw what was driving value. So I really sought to get to the heart of what was driving value inside an organization. So I went from the words to the words and images, to the pixels, to the information structure behind it, to the strategy driving it, into the nexus of value creation, which was innovation, right? So I launched my company in 2007.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, you talked a little bit about the politics within the organization that you were in, and how sometimes you find it's even better in business. Can you talk a little bit about how politics and culture impact your ability to work with organizations and to drive innovation forward there?
Right, that is the big piece, right? And we will not work inside a culture or with a client if it's highly politicized or if the culture is rigid and fixed, regardless of how much we need the money or how much we need the work. Because if they have an inability to change, we don't want to be performing what's known as innovation theater or agile theater at any of
Right.
our clients, right? It's frustrating for everyone. You get the staff real wound up, you get them lathered up and inspired, you teach them new methods, new mindsets of behavior, you get them wound up to where they're going 90 miles an hour and they crash into the wall of the orthodoxies of the company and the culture, which are not going to change. And that's just frustrating. So we like to have senior leadership sign off. We like to make sure they're on a change journey and a value journey, that they are open with being honest with themselves. Like the first step in AA, they have to admit there's a problem with the old paradigm. Right?
Yeah.
And from that, they're able to seek change. And then we find if we have senior leadership approval, that is more than 50% of the battle. We know that then there's hope that the culture can shift and change, and that there's also some kind of slush fund away from the operating budget. Now, when things get tough, it can go toward that change as well.
Okay. Yeah, I often, I've got a background. I worked with a lot of software development teams early in my career, and I often, when I talk about the shift to working more on business agility, I talk about just that. I felt like I was getting in a place where I was teaching a bunch of people some new methods and then putting them in an environment where that would all get crushed. So I can relate to that. It's very soul crushing to spend a lot of time with a group of people like that and then to see it not actually come to fruition. So I like that approach. I appreciate you guys, the way that you guys work.
And there's one more thing I'd like to add there, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
The most disheartening thing is that when you watch the human potential side of your work come alive and people really get inspired, really get passion. I'll give you one quick example. We were dealing with a major pharmaceutical company that had come up with an eczema care system. And I took a 60-year-old chemist who was working on the formulation into the homes of 3 eczema sufferers. And he heard their stories about how they would put Clorox in their bathtub and nobody understands the living hell of their skin. And when they go out on vacation, they have to stay in the hotel room. Their families don't even understand how isolating it is. So after that 3rd interview, we were back in the car and he started crying. And I said, "What's wrong?" He said, "I feel like I've wasted my whole career. Before it was always about the formulation, but now I'm solving a real problem for these real people." And he mentioned those 3 women's names. It happened to be 3 women. And that happens again and again and again, where someone gets really inspired, they start to really embody these methods and they get this sense of mission. And then they just get it bludgeoned out of them by the corporation. So it's wonderful when they're able to exercise those muscles to create value for the company. But in some points where they just get really, really inspired and motivated, and then it's business as usual. And that can be very disheartening.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk about, this concept of business agility and innovation. So, a lot of people think of those in different ways. How do you think about innovation and, how it's used today to drive value forward in businesses?
Innovation to me is a set of methods that create net new organic value for a firm, right? And it doesn't matter which methodology you're using. You can use lean innovation, you can use jobs to be done, you can use design thinking, you can use the old strategos methods, right? And then there are other methods out there, the SIT method and others. But the objective is all the same, which is competitive advantage, differentiation, and helping to understand that you're bringing something that works for the tested wants, needs, and desires of your audience. So you're not creating waste, just more noise in the market that's going to end up in a landfill or on the shelves of big lots, which is worse than death, right? Or, and software has its own weird halls of Valhalla like that as well, right? Where things just don't get launched or they just fail very, very quickly. And but the interesting thing about it, and this is the cross section, the intersection of business agility and innovation, is that in order to get that net new value, you have to break the old industrial age paradigm of doing business, right? So you can throw out your business case. You've never read a bad business case. They're like a testimonial. You've got to test and learn real quickly. You've got to get proof of concept and different proof points again and again and again by doing sprints, by doing larger tests, which call those epics, whatever you want to call them. But you also have to change the mindsets and behaviors and practices of the organization itself. And that's where it dovetails nicely with business agility, giving them some set methods to begin to change the muscle memory of the place, which is the culture.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So let's look to kind of, the current climate. So right now we're dealing with a number of things. So there's this COVID-19 pandemic that's going on, and there's this massive social justice movement that's been sparked off. And so there's just tons of change and volatility in the marketplace. So how do you think that amount of volatility and change in the environment is affecting the way organizations think about innovation right now?
It's really interesting to go case by case with the response, but in general, it's either paralyzing and freezing innovation, or it's accelerating change. And in many cases, especially with business agility and transformations, it's a great accelerant. One of our clients is a large fundraising organization that had many field events, and overnight they have to now create meaningful digital experiences to try to have their revenue be similar to what it was, because 30,000 events just got canceled, right? What are you going to do? So it's forced them to be wildly creative and to tap into resources and change momentum that they didn't know that they had, right? And many other companies are just doing the same thing that happened during the Great Recession. They're battening down the hatch. They got a little PPP money, and they're just sitting and waiting it out and not investing in change, And what I would like to say is that fortune does favor the bold, and those who are out getting insights right now, figuring out where things are going to settle, future casting on how they're going to settle, and positioning their company in many ways to prosper in the emerging world are going to do much better. That's the lesson from the Great Recession. But then you're also seeing a great birth of typical companies that would not make a political stand become a values-based company and put their values on their sleeve. So the whole movement of conscious capitalism is really taking place because of all the activism and everything else that's happening. And that's been really interesting and polarizing on some levels, but necessary to see if indeed, if Citizens United treats corporations as people, to see corporations have conscience makes them interesting as social beings, right? It's this new phenomenon that we've never really thought about before.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's been a long time coming. I think there's been kind of this, slow ripple effect that we've seen happening, and just with some of the events that have happened this year, I think that's turned into kind of a tidal wave. And it's great to see those more companies starting to adopt this idea that they need to have a conscience and they need to be not only doing business, but also trying to further humanity in some way.
Right. And so there's again, if you look back at the whole studies of conscious capitalism, there's the great formal study by Raj Sisodia called Firms of Endearment. It just had a 10-year anniversary. It was the longest longitudinal study of companies that were value-based in history, and they outperform pure profit motive companies 10 to 1. And you're looking at companies like Starbucks and Patagonia and Whole Foods, right? Companies like that. But it's a great study. But now to see more mainline companies such as AT&T to fall into that model is really interesting. Because if you go back to the roots of capitalism, I know I'm geeking out here, but it's important. Adam Smith wrote 2 books, right? And one that we all know, The Wealth of Nations, is about the shareholder only value, profits at any price, masculine essence of doing business. But his second book was about the more classically, archetypally maternal, about how organizations, corporations are just corpus made of people, and that they need to take care of the people. And it almost talks about concentric circles of care. And we leave that out in the Industrial Revolution and in any MBA school. Nobody reads that book, right? They only read the greedy one, right? And so to see this rebirth of conscience in business is a very good thing, which gets to one last point I want to make about your question before. You talked about business agility and innovation. And I'm convinced that we are moving away from the world that just objectifies people into 2 dimensions, consumer or customer, B2C, B2B, and looks at them more as human. And the companies that are doing really well have these values, but then they use these methods to understand what's really needed, even what's not unspoken. And so they place a higher value about the things they're creating in finding the areas to grow real value and become as almost a marriage of the community with the people they're serving. And they're certainly bringing their best to that marriage versus just trying to sell more stuff to more people, which is the old paradigm.
Right. Yeah. Yes, I think that I think I found that that approach helps people to not only just understand their customers but relate to them also. And I think what I kind of have observed, and I'd like to get your opinion on this, is that over the last maybe decade or so, I think people have always been a little disillusioned with the public sector, but I think people have started to realize that at least not all problems can be solved by the public sector, by the big government, and private institutions are a lot better equipped and able to solve some of these problems. So if you look at some of the contact tracing apps that Google and Apple are putting out, those are put out much more quickly than anything that the government would have been able to put together. And so I think people are starting to realize that some of these societal problems that we have, it's private industry that's best equipped to handle those. And people have decided to start voting with their dollars, right? So it's not just that treating people well within your organization is good for the organization, but also having a conscience as an organization shows your customers who you are. And that's beneficial, not only, just for the good of the company, but also financially. Have you seen anything similar to that? Or what are your
Oh yeah.
thoughts?
I share your sensibilities very much. I don't
Right.
know if I have much to add there.
Okay.
You said it very well. Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah. It's all over the headlines. I mean, just look at what Facebook just took off a lot of
Right.
ads right now. What Google's doing, the walkout at Microsoft over the government contracts. I mean, if anybody's interested, you could just go and do it, some kind of search for
Yeah,
that topic.
sure. So, you talked about, different methods that you guys have used within your company and different ways that you can do innovation and, in thinking about getting to know your customer. I know I've been a part of one of your design thinking boot camps, which is phenomenal. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit more about how those work and how you guys got started and what the goal is when you do those with organizations.
Sure. So the best advice I can give anybody in a non-pandemic state is to leave your computer and get out and walk out of your building, right? And if you really want to create something of new value for people, your head is the least important thing. Your ears are the most important. So go where they shop, go where they hang out, go where they relieve stress, go hang out. You've not really lived until you've been kicked out of a Home Depot or Kroger or, for hanging out there so long and asking people questions. But in the virtual world, it's a little different.
Okay.
But it's important for people to, we talked a lot about this change with business agility and innovation. And it's one thing to talk about it and put metrics about it and say, hey, we're going to innovate. But it's another to actually carve out time and be intentional to work on these methods and master them and learn them and then repeat them. And so we created our boot camps for several reasons. The first was to build up the muscle memory inside organizations so the old habits and the old muscles didn't take back over, right?
Okay.
And so when we do private boot camps, we want people to truly empathize with the people for whom they're creating. First part, before you start creating solutions, before you test your prototypes, before you come up with any socialization plans of them, right? That's going to be very, very important. But then it's also a way to build community. When we originally started the Memphis Innovation Boot Camp, we started it with our colleagues at Merck Healthcare, FedEx, International Paper, and the University of Memphis. And what we wanted to do was just broaden the sense of community of innovators and get to know one another. And so we made a call, say, hey, we've gotten all the materials from Stanford's D School. They came out and gave us, we put a Memphis twist to it where we're going to work on a social problem with all these corporate innovators while we're teaching the methods, but then more importantly, building community. And so a lot of the open call boot camps then are really about building that community while teaching the methods to people out there who are doing it every day. And we've seen so many cross-pollinizations from our 9 years of the public boot camp. But more and more we find that companies want to do private boot camps, and they'll do the same thing, but in a different manner, meaning they'll take people from different departments and as disparate as HR, we'll bring in the controller, we'll bring in some people from brand, from product, some engineers, and who have really never met. They may have seen each other in the break room, and they'll get to know each other really deeply and realize that everybody has a different lens and different aptitude for solving problems. That we solve them better all together, getting to one of the soft skills that we teach, which is radical collaboration.
Okay, wow. Yeah, I know the experience I had was amazing, and I love the way that you guys use that to, at least with the public boot camps, you guys use those to try to affect social change while teaching people those methods and do some good in the community. So, as somebody who loves the city of Memphis, I really appreciate that you guys take that approach. You mentioned in there that it's that kind of approach or that kind of method is really best in this kind of non-pandemic environment where you can get out and talk to people and interact and engage with them in that way. And I know you guys have something called Sprout now that I think is geared towards trying to do the same thing in our new environment. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Sure. So at the Southern Growth Studio, we have an ethnographic department, which means we have some business anthropologists on staff. And for our insights work and our innovation work, these deep qualitative insights are the bedrock of everything that we do. And it helps us reframe problems, really understand the people for whom we're creating new solutions and creating value. But we found with the pandemic that our best advice, which is leave the building, isn't safe. And so we had to come up with a way that was really easy for them to get field and market insights and inexpensive. So we developed Sprout as a way to go and do, we'll just call it quick and dirty qualitative research. So in less than a week, we'll recruit the right people. We'll have different virtual conversations with them. We'll even give them exercises and homework. Let's just say it's something around a container company. This was one of our clients who came and did Sprout. We mailed them different types of containers, and we also had them take their tablets, phones, or computers into their place where the containers that they reuse and store versus the one that they throw away or recycle. So we come up with the right exercises for them to give meaning to the project, to see what the ritual use is for these things. And so the last thing I'll say about Sprout, there's many data points to back this up. There's an MIT article that if you're doing this kind of qualitative research, it is best to just use a really small sample size, and how a small sample size of 2 to 12 is much more important than rethinking from a statistically relevant quant kind of view, right? And one example I'll give from that goes from the Annals of Innovation, and that was Procter & Gamble. All their data told them from surveys that people, especially women, said they mopped twice a week and that they wanted a very concentrated mopping fluid. And so they spent about $120 million and came up with what the people wanted according to the business case and research, and it was a flop, right? And so it was off the shelves in 6 weeks. People lost their careers. Many people were fired. And so instead, they used a firm like ours in the Boston area only and went into just a handful of homes and saw that people lied on the surveys. They don't really mop twice a week, right? They're like, and once they had them said, show me, this is why we get out of the building. Right. The process of mopping, they heard the sighs and the groans and and they had to go to scary places like spider closets and garages and all kinds to get them up. Then you heard, oh, my back. And, I really hate this. I've got a confession to make. And so they were able to follow this whole process really quickly, come up with some cheap and dirty and quick prototypes, affectionately known as a diaper on a stick. Okay. And within 6 weeks, they had $1 billion franchise known as Swiffer on their hands, right? And that's the power of this work and sort of the seeds that something like Sprout could give you. If you're just going to sit back passively at your computer, at your desk, and follow what somebody says on a survey, you might create more stuff the world doesn't need. But if you're able to go in their homes, even virtually, and into their hearts and into their heads and into their feelings, That's the currency. Find out where they're frustrated and when their needs aren't met. Then you
Right.
can create something of real value. So Sprout's a quick and dirty way to do that.
Okay. Yeah, that's fantastic. I think that's really useful for people because I do think, going back to, my inspiration that story makes me think of is, some of the stuff in the lean startup community where they say, you can take all the customer surveys you want about your product, but until you can at least get one customer to pay you for it, it's not a product, right? That's not a good
That's
idea.
right.
You haven't validated the idea at all. And so actually getting that real life in-person validation through the experience of your customers is great. And I think it's great that you guys have a product now that lets people do that, even though we can't go out and interact the way that we would really like to.
Right.
So it's fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So I know you and I are both, small business owners, but we work with larger organizations for the most part. But there are a lot of, small business owners or people in small businesses that are looking for help in innovating right now. So what is some advice that you would give to other small business owners around how they can do innovation in a time like this when they might be just struggling to survive?
I would say it's a great time to do it, and just carve out a little bit of time, a few hours for a team at a certain day of the week where they can follow one of the innovation methods and
Mhm.
follow through and just recruit friends and family, right? It's no different than doing user research and that great book called Don't Make Me Think by Steve Klug, right? He said, back then, he said, look, just use friends and family, take them a six pack, have them look at a hand-drawn wireframe. It's the
Right.
same thing with a product, a service, a solution, or just figuring out their frustration. Start close to home. And then if you're recruiting for something that's very specific or specialized, you still have a network with whom you could do the first batch test, and if you need to do another test. So break it down into manageable size chunks, recruit easily, and follow the process, right? There's so much on the internet about all the innovation methodologies. But I would say intentional, just to see through the process, follow the process, and invest the time because you have it now, where in many cases you don't, right? You're
Right. Right.
just staying at home and trying to force new business, right, is not going to change anything. But if you made your offering better, that might change everything.
Right, right. So, are there things that you guys are doing internally at Southern Growth Studio right now that were kind of spurred by some of the things that are going on that you're using to increase your resilience or your innovative powers just within your own organization?
Yes. So we take some of our medicine. We do some exercises weekly on some of our culture calls and status calls. As well, the way that we've responded, we've challenged ourselves, and that was the birth of Sprout to try to find one particular new product offering that we could offer to the market. But then we've had to be completely adaptive. So I'll just give you a snapshot and I'll be completely transparent. March 12th, I guess 13th, that Monday,
Hmm.
every contract we had was canceled. Every verbal proposal we had was held up.
Okay.
It looked very, very bleak. We lost about $500,000 in one day. It was, we didn't know what we were going to do, right? We had a little reserve, but not much. We're a small business. And we saw that many of our traditional corporate clients were in either that freeze mode or, this crisis could be an opportunity mode. So
Okay.
the ones that we quickly discern were in the freeze mode, we just left them there frozen in shock, right? And we went and sold to the higher ground of those of the willing, right? We
Okay.
always say innovation and probably business agility is a lot like love. People have to
Yeah,
be
sure.
willing and capable, right? And so
Right.
we went to the willing first
Okay.
off. But then we started getting calls crazily from a lot of funded startups who, what we found, and this was just dumb luck, was that the PE space and the startup space is using this to their great advantage. And
Okay.
so we have shifted some of our whole business mix to work with funded high growth startups and started work with them in a way that's mutually advantageous. And from our perspective, we're on an minority equity track, and we get a reduced fee for this work while helping them grow and reach all these proof points to get to the next tranche of investment. And so that has been really interesting. And because we started at the height of the recession, we know this, and this has always been in our business plan. I mean, at the Southern Growth Studio, we pay our rent by having a consultancy, but we know that we're going to create wealth that would then become a generator for other wealth and other businesses by partnering with startups and taking equity seats and doing that. So it is really catapulted that vision into action very, very quickly. But we're smart enough to read what was happening and seize it and find more of it, right? Smart like a hog finding truffles, that
is. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a great story about, pivoting in the marketplace, finding a new market for the products that you offer. It kind of makes me, it kind of sounds like what you're saying is you guys are, in the startup or in the accelerator space. You often hear about people talking about startups needing adult supervision because often they don't have the process and the discipline to do a lot of these things. It sounds like you guys are kind of acting as that adult supervision from a product development standpoint. Is that
so?
So
We actually will play several roles at several of these companies, and that includes a CFO role, right? Fractional CFO, fractional CMO, fractional strategy officer, and fractional innovation department. All of those.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. Wow. That sounds really cool.
It's fun. Yeah.
So, back on the, talking about the larger organizations that, I think you probably traditionally have done more work with and that are maybe coming out of that freeze mode now and are maybe starting to see that there are some opportunities and want to talk about innovation within their organizations. What are the, maybe just the top 3 things you think leaders should be prioritizing in order to get that ball rolling?
Well, one, and this comes from Frederick Poof, the doctor of innovation, the chief innovation officer at Google. You first have to have the psychological safety of your team in mind. Okay. So in our context, that means it's up to, you either need to empower the individual performers or have the managers make sure that no one's going to be in a situation that's going to compromise them getting the virus, right? Just bluntly. Right.
Yeah, sure.
But then also there needs to be the trust and the runway to actually iterate, innovate, experiment while they're creating value without being judged too harshly. So that's the first thing, is psychological safety in all of its connotations.
Okay.
The second thing would be knowing that it's a good time to get in adjacent spaces, and there are emerging spaces. We've had a few of our clients who traditional manufacturers, HVAC, water heating, that kind of thing, who are now moving into safety and sanitation as the world reopens, right?
Right.
And those are some of the companies that, again, they saw that the crisis was an accelerator for change, and they want to be positioned to take and own some aspect of it. And so the point I'm making here is that they have to have some vision about some adjacent markets into which they can play and experiment. So psychological safety, some at least notion of which adjacent markets we can experiment in. And then thirdly, it's just time and budget. I would say take a small team if you haven't done this before. Make sure they're working with someone like you or someone like us who's moderating and leading them through the process. And if you don't, they're just going to go to their default decision-making, default stakeholders, and default ways of doing business and not do this genuinely and well, ultimately not creating new value for the organization or the plan.
Yeah, I think, I'm biased, of course, and as are you, but, I think having a guide really helps, especially when you're introducing concepts and methods that, the people that are in your organization probably aren't familiar with, right? But I like the idea that you talk about small teams in the space that you work in, because, often on my side, I work with organizations that really want to do these large, big bang transformations and change the organization overnight. And there are some success stories out there of people that have been able to do that. I think it's possible those are a little padded. But I've found a lot more success in starting with a small team and then developing that muscle memory, developing that discipline within the organization, and then scaling it from there.
Right.
How does that work on the innovation side when you talk about design thinking methods and things like that? So once you've kind of proven that there's benefit in those methods to the organization,
Yep.
how do you guys work on scaling that out to the rest of the organization?
So that's the way we usually work, is that we'll first meet with the senior leadership and they say, we want everybody to innovate. It's everybody's job.
Right.
We're like, okay, are you sure you know what you're asking for?
Yeah.
Why don't we prove that theory? Give me a small multidisciplinary team, just handpick 5 people, and then we'll take them on a journey. You'll have a portfolio of option value, short, medium, long-term value that you can figure out if you want to take this stuff to market, right? We'll take some things to market as part of the process. So give me 2-3 months, a fourth of % of these people's time. And then we come back with the concepts, have the people talk about the experience, how it's like working in this context compared to their old world, and what soft skills they've learned, what methods they've learned, have they utilized them, how they could take them back to their normal position. But then we'll ask for money to go out and commercialize a few of the pieces. And then the senior leaders can see the camaraderie that's happening, the inspiration that's happening, and the value that's created. And they have to seriously take inventory and ask themselves, this is an interesting process, but that's not the way we do business. How disruptive is this going to be? On the other hand, how valuable can it be? How can we most prudently scale it out, and think through and maybe work with 8 small groups at once and just change it from the inside out? I will say, Stephen, that one piece that makes the Southern Growth Studio unique is that doing those small experiments, you figure out what their cultures will accept. And that means what risk tolerance they have, what kind of methods will be accepted there and which won't, what level of fidelity of prototypes are, everything gets exposed just by doing these small tests. And if you try to do what's called a meta transformation, the whole organization at once, without testing it first and seeing the response to it, you don't know what orthodoxies are going to rear up and what resistance pockets are going to start a revolt, right? It's a very dangerous situation to ask for something like that. Now, if you're in crisis and need transformation, that's a different scenario. But if you're doing well and you want to transform just to do better, my approach would be gradual and run it as a series of tests and scale it out once you reach certain points of proof points in an innovation strategy. And that includes revenue and soft skill like collaboration.
Right. Yeah, I often talk about it with customers as, the larger the transformation or the larger scale we try to go to at first, the more pain we're going to cause in the organization too, because of those orthodoxies and those things that rear up that we don't know about. And I also find that those smaller successes kind of create a snowball effect in the organization where you start to have, this volunteer transformation, right? You start to have people in the organization raise their hands to try to be a part of what you're doing. Do you guys see a lot of that too?
We do, but it's really only from about 10 to 15% of the people usually that are there. And then, the other piece is that without really thinking through a whole change management plan and thinking through all of the organizational dynamics of transformation here, it can really wreak a lot of havoc and be very disruptive. Believe me, I love the symbolism of the phoenix, and I think that organizations rise, fall, need to be redeemed and reborn, right? But consciously, right? With a process. That's really the only way to do it, with a guide who has experience doing that.
Okay. Yeah, I completely agree. And you talked a little bit about creating inspiration inside of some of those organizations. And I know you've always got all these great ideas that come from all over the place. So can you talk to us a little bit about where do you find inspiration for some of the stuff that you're working on?
So first, I'm going to give you an example of some of these inspiration proof points at a client, right?
Okay. Yeah, great.
And we like to show a lot of the human to human revolution of our work, right? And we were working with a large pharma company and a couple of their smaller over the counter products. But we wanted to be able to socialize that journey. So in the break room and several very highly trafficked hallways, we created big posters of the people with whom we'd done empathy. And we talked about their frustration shopping for these types of items in their category and what they really want and what they seek and the kind of relationship they want with a brand. And we made these big posters, and just one example of storytelling.
Okay.
And we knew that the revolution was complete and we could scale it up more when the president of that whole division globally in her town hall speech quoted one of the people in the poster by first name Sarah. We're doing this for people like Sarah. We're figuring out what the needs are of people. We're people first, right? And I endorse this. And that was a great moment. But find little ways to tell the story and to socialize these things and get it out there as part of meaning making, which is the only way you're really going to change culture, right? First off, but I've always been wildly curious, and I take inspiration wherever I can get it. I'm no dummy. So, and you had asked me before we started recording, what books do you read? And I typically read about 30 to 35 books at a time. And some of them slowly, it's not
sure.
Strange categories: science fiction, metaphysics, Persian poetry from the 13th century, American history from the 40s. I try not to just read basic business books. I know that if I show up to a meeting and everybody's read, I'll just pick on Collins, right? And everyone's quoting Good to Great. It's a very shallow brain pool there, right? But if someone throws in a quote from Dune, right? Wow, that's something we can play with. Or something, it's not just the flywheel. It's not just a mathematical equation. Because ultimately, the things that you and I are talking about, transformation, agility, innovation, you have to throw out sort of the set systems for how you do it, and you've got to think unthinkable thoughts. And in that universe, 1 + 1 doesn't always equal 2, and you don't even do math the same way. It may not even be, you may think it's a math problem, but it could be a problem of relating, right? Or acoustic physics, and that you'll have to figure your way into it. So all those things of wayfinding and nuances come in. And so I have to feed that fountain of curiosity all the time. And it's I get it everywhere. I just tried to be open to that my whole life. It served me well so far.
Yeah. And, I think you probably wouldn't believe how many people I talk to, in my field, and people that are coaches or innovators. And that's really common. A lot of us find inspiration from all over the place, because I find, and I don't know if this is the case with you, but I find it doesn't really, I'm so passionate about what I do. It doesn't really matter what I'm looking at or reading, whether it's art or listening to music. Somewhere in the back of my subconscious, I'm trying to figure out how that can be useful in telling a story or in helping to make a metaphor. And so my brain is always working on making those connections. And so I find, the more far and wide I look for those connections, the better examples I find.
And you don't know how freeing it is for the people with whom we work inside corporations to leave the mask of their role down and welcome all their curiosities into solving complex problems, being fully human and fully alive. It's the first time they've ever sort of thought of themselves non-categorically as an engineer inside this, and just as a human, I'm a father. I feel so. There's another story where we were doing a hackathon with a client trying to hack into a particular problem. And after going through several of the exercises and creating a lot of the things, everybody's letting their guard down. Some people were crying. but the one man had written a concept and drawn something called the Dragon Slayer. And it's these little moments that he pulled out a Beanie Baby out of his travel sack. And this was a hard-nosed engineer. I think he used to be in the military. And we're like, wow, and he started crying. He's like, yeah, I don't know. I just felt like I had to name it this. My daughter, who's 4, always gives me one of her Beanie Babies for safety every time I travel. He's not normally allowed those kinds of moments being a company man. Right.
Yeah,
but the more you allow people to be fully expressive, the more they're going to create value on your behalf. That's the lesson we're learning. That's the human to human revolution we're in.
Yeah, I love that. And, it goes back to, we were talking a little bit earlier about this, conscientious capitalism, right? And I think a big part of that is having diversity in your organization in order to create diversity of thought, right? But I think without that, the way you talked about was letting people pull off their masks and be their own unique selves in an organization, right? We can have all the diversity initiatives that we want, but if we're not allowing people to bring their real authentic selves into the organization, they're not actually contributing in that way and creating that diverse pool of thought. What are your thoughts on that?
Right. My thoughts are, I would love to see a commission study of organizations that actually because it sounds so soft and but I've seen millions of dollars created on behalf of our clients when they let people be people. Right. And I would love to see a formal study there. That's my first thought, just so I can talk to the CFO types and say, well, here's the math behind it. Now unbutton your shirt collar. Tell me the time you went dancing with your wife.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so I know we're about out of time, so I just wanted to give you a chance. Is there anything else that you wanted to let people know about, or maybe a way to contact you as people have questions or anything like that?
Sure. Well, anyone is always welcome to email me at michael@southerngrowthstudio.com or find me on LinkedIn. And if you have a question about insights, innovation, or strategy, ask me. And I'm not going to try to sell you, but I'm here as part of the community and as part of what I see as this revolution of innovation into being the best humans we can be on the planet. So I'm here to help. Please reach out, anybody. Stephen, thank you for everything you do, and thank you for having me today. It's been a wonderful conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for being here. I think our listeners are going to get a lot of value out of everything you said. You always have such wise words, and it's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on today. So thank you for taking the time to do it.
Thank you. I'm honored. Thanks again.
That's it for this episode of the 330 Forecast. If you need help with your agile transformation, check out our website at the334group.com or click the link in the description. If you enjoyed the episode, click the like button below, share it, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel to make sure you stay up to date on the latest from the 334 group. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.